There's a famous scene in the Gospels where a widow puts 2 small coins into the temple treasury, and Jesus says to his disciples, look at this woman, she's put more in than everyone else because they gave out of their abundance, but she gave out of her poverty everything she has to live on. Often this woman is celebrated as a hero whose selfless sacrifice should be emulated. And that does fit Jesus' teaching, doesn't it? Because he says to the rich young ruler, sell everything you have and give it to the poor and then follow me. And he says, pick up your cross and follow me. He says, whoever tries to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. So selfless sacrifice is really part of discipleship, part of following Jesus and imitating him, having him as your master. He is the ultimate selfless sacrifice. But there's something else going on in this passage with the widow's mite. If we look immediately before, just look at the whole context, you see there's something else going on. So Jesus is at the temple, and in Mark 12, verse 38, it says, and in his teaching he said, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and like greetings in the marketplaces and have the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at feasts, who devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation. And he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums. And a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, truly I say to you, this poor widow's put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contribute out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all she had to live on. So in context, he's just told his disciples, beware of the scribes who want to, they devour widows' houses. And then he sits down and he shows them, look at this widow. She's put in everything she has to live on. So in the immediate context, there's 2 repeated words. One of them is widow, but the other one is abundance. There's a Greek word where you can have a verb, peristeo, or adjective, peristeron. They're related words, the same root, and it's to do with abundance. So peristeo means to abundantly have, to have an abundance. This is what they are giving out of in verse 44. They're giving out of their abundance. So abundance in English, it's a noun, but in Greek, if a verb is in a form called participle, it's like they're having an abundance. So it's kind of functioning a bit like a noun. They're giving out of the abundance that they have, of their having an abundance. And then the adjective is peristeron, which means like abundantly or more abundant, and is obscured in the English. But when I read, they will receive the greater condemnation. That word greater is a translation of peristeron. So like a literal translation that would keep the connection between these 2 words would be, they will have a more abundant condemnation or judgment. Their judgment will be more abundant. So Jesus is rebuking the temple, who have made this woman a victim of their greed. They have abundant wealth, but they'll have abundant judgment. They devour the widow's house, and she's left with nothing. And so they receive judgment. And that is what we have after verse 44, start of the next chapter. Jesus gets up and leaves, and his disciples talk about how beautiful the temple is, and he says, not a stone will be left standing. Jesus is against the abuse that this institution's carrying out against this woman. So is the woman a victim or a hero? Well, she's both. We don't actually have to choose between these 2 interpretations. Jesus himself is going to be the paschal victim and also the mighty hero who conquers sin and death. In his death and resurrection, he's the paschal victim that dies so that we can pass through death and judgment. And he's also confronting an evil power that he's going to defeat. And when he ascends from death and from the grave, he's going to display his victory in his resurrection. So somebody can be a victim of an abusive institution, but also be a hero, because her selflessness and her self-sacrifice is received by God as worship, even though it's received by the scribes as greed, as their greed and their an opportunity to abuse this woman. So we don't need to choose between, is this passage, is it a rebuke against the temple, or is it a celebration of this woman? It could be both. All right, but one more question remains, I think. So, why does Jesus rebuke the temple for telling people to give everything, or allowing people to give everything, when he explicitly tells people to give everything? And also, Elijah in 1 Kings, the word of the Lord comes to him and tells him, go to Zarephath, find a widow, tell her to give you her last bit of bread. She's like, this is my last bit of bread. And then he tells her that if she does it, then she'll live. And she does it. She gives the last bit of bread. So is Elijah devouring widows' houses? Is Jesus devouring the houses of his disciples when he tells them to follow him? Well, no, because Elijah, he eats the last bit. It's like he receives the widow's mite. But then the widow of Zarephath isn't destitute. She has enough to survive the famine. There's 3 years of famine and everybody has not enough. But this widow has enough every day. She hasn't got a big pile of stuff, but every day she finds that her flour's not run out. There's more bread for her and her son and Elijah. So in hearing the word of the Lord, the call to self-sacrifice, and then doing it, she actually receives life. And likewise, Jesus' followers, in losing their lives, they find the fullness of life. In giving away the cost to follow Jesus, they discover the greatest treasure that there is. Jesus commands self-sacrifice, selflessness, but he doesn't eat up our houses and leave us destitute. He leaves us more full and more abundant than we were before. Some people use this scene just to fleece and abuse God's people. This scene is so often used to tell people, oh, this woman's a hero, copy her, without noticing how she's also a victim of a religious institution, a religious community that is doing nothing for her. This passage is supposed to point us to Jesus and see his justice and his commitment to providing for his people, to the fullness of life that we have in him. It's supposed to be that the emptiness of the temple's abuse of its members, it contrasted with the generosity and life that Jesus offers. The self-sacrifice of the widow and the self-sacrifice of Jesus' disciples might look the same, but the result is different. This scene should not just encourage selflessness as if that virtue on its own is the end goal for a Christian. Don't let preachers just offer you behavior modification. Do this, don't do that. Instead of offering you an encounter with Jesus that will change your life. If you're part of a religious community and you're giving everything to it, but you're not getting Jesus, then you might be getting fleeced. Following Jesus definitely modifies our behavior. It changes our behavior. But don't skip the Jesus part to get to the behavior modification part. Don't let someone try to just make you copy the dance moves of following Jesus without actually hearing the music that is Jesus' life and death, resurrection, ascension, gift of the Holy Spirit, and his coming return. Are you just modifying your behavior, or are you encountering Jesus?